Welcome to Hashtag General, the show where the intro is written by me at least 3 seconds before the show goes live. So I think that one was a 4 out of 5 compared to the runs in the past, which are usually 2s out of 5 or 2s out of 10. With me, as always, my fellow host Chris Akamura. How are you doing, Chris?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, hanging in there. It's month 10 of 2020 continued. But yeah, no major complaints, only minor ones. But yeah, how have you been? Like, just
Surviving.
surviving. Yeah. And I feel like that's what it's. I'm so used to how things are now. Like, James and I were talking about this, how we're kind of leery of going back to the old normal. How everyone refers to this as the new normal of like social isolation and working remotely. It's like, no, this has become normal. The old normal, if someone's like, oh yeah, you have to work in the office 5 days a week, I'm already just like, that sounds horrible.
Right.
I'm acclimatized.
Yeah, it's weird, like obviously LA has gotten a lot better
Yes,
about
thank God.
everything. Uh but even saying that, it is weird to like even going out with a mask and like people with vaccines and stuff like that, like going out and just being in crowds of people. Like it's weird to watch shows and movies and things where people aren't social distancing and it makes you feel uncomfortable. You're
Well,
like,
and the
oh,
thing that's so crazy is like I know from the production standpoint because I still have friends in the production space. Like the best productions are really stringent about who is allowed on set. Like
right.
if they aren't in a bubble themselves, they are testing you every time you go in. And that's in some cases they will isolate people until like they get a positive or negative test result. And if you test positive for COVID, you're sent home. So if someone is on camera in any like solid production environment right now, they have been tested. The crew have been tested. There's still like kind of socially distancing, but not like to the extent we would in public because all of that stringent testing. Now imagine that and then walking into a space where there's no testing going on and people are kind of acting the same way. And it's just like, I know the person on the morning program has been tested today. I have no clue if the person in like wherever public space I'm at right now has been tested ever
Right.
or actually been socially isolating. It's Yeah, it's one of the arguments you hear a lot when
Well, it's
people talk about.
not even that. Like, I just mean in terms of like I was rewatching Sherlock, and
Mm,
like obviously Sherlock was made long before COVID, but like in my mind, it makes me feel uncomfortable watching it because I'm like, ooh, they're like very close to big groups of people,
well,
and I'm
I
like,
I had a same thing with watching. It's a topic this week, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But I had the same thought while watching The Expanse. Any science fiction that's set in the future now, I'm sitting here wondering like, is it just like they've cured it? Or is it like under enough control that the idea of social isolating and keeping distance is like no longer a thing? It's like, like what? Because humanity went through a pandemic 100 years ago,
right,
and clearly, like they did the same thing. They wore masks. They socially isolated. They stayed home. Like all the things we're doing now. Once this is done, do we go back to whatever, or is it just like, are we permanently going to be stuck in this? I spray down my groceries every time I bring them home. I keep my distance. Like I don't want to go out in public. Like it's
well, there's some things that I really like to keep, right? Like there's
yeah,
some things where I'm like, oh, this is better or this is good.
yeah.
Like honestly, the mask thing, that's a pretty normal thing in most non-Western countries.
Like
Where
I
like if you're sick, you just wear a mask. Where like in America, it's it's been like if you're sick, you're like, oh fuck it, I'm gonna tough it out. Where it's like, yeah, but you're also spreading whatever germs you have
Yeah,
around.
and even if you're not sick, I know now can't see myself going on mass transit without a mask anytime soon. Even if I'm not
Well, yeah,
sick,
right.
because there are plenty
I
of
don't
people
even
who are going to be
know.
like, I'm fine. I can tough it out. And it's just like, I don't want to be sitting next to that guy.
Yeah,
But yeah, also like again, the remote work aspect. Like James and I were actually talking about this like either this week or last week. Doesn't matter. Time is meaningless. About how the idea of spending an hour or more in a commute just sounds even like worse now. Like it was bad
well,
enough
yeah,
already, but now it's like having lived in a world where, oh, I didn't actually need to commute in like an hour and a half each way. Like I actually didn't need to do that to do my job. It's like you damn well have a good reason for me to go through that to go into the office
right,
anymore.
right.
Um, but yeah, just COVID things. Um, yeah, but other than that, what have you been up to? Or what's new with you?
Nothing. That's about it. I mean, like just kind of surviving and doing the same normal stuff. I mean, again, until we have some kind of major change, it's really kind of status quo, life as usual.
Yeah. Um, all right, let's kind of move along. I know you talked about James. Don't switch topics yet. Sorry, no, I just saw you do the move. Even though it is kind of related to it, you told me right before we started rolling that you were looking at a new iPad. So,
Oh, so this is sort of something that I think we talked about this when they announced the iPad Air, that the iPad Air was going
mhm.
to be the iPad that I was waiting for, where all
Yeah,
I wanted was the smaller bezels and the USB-C. That's kind of like
yeah.
I wanted full.
I think I've said, I don't remember if I said it on the show, but I know I said it to other people. If the iPad Air that recently came out was the iPad Air that got launched right before I bought my iPad Pro, I would have bought that instead.
Yeah, so iPad Air was something I was always looking at, um, and like it's just sort of a me wanting to consolidate tech because I think
Hmm.
me and you are kind of in the same boat where we just have like massive amounts of tech that like we don't really use anymore or like are kind of outdated and then kind of just sit around.
Yeah.
Um, and so I traded in my MacBook that I haven't really used in like a couple of years. It used to be my daily driver. It's not anymore. But so I traded in my MacBook and a couple of iPad minis and uh, got in got my iPad Pro or my iPad Air. I ordered it. Uh, so it should be here. It says it should be here next week at some point. Um,
Cool.
so I'm super excited about that. But I do want to say shout out to Apple support for being just the best. Um, and I don't know how much you've dealt with Apple support, but they've been nothing but awesome every time I've had to deal with them.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Um,
say had to deal with them a lot, but every time I have had to deal with Apple in a support situation, it is seriously, you walk away going, oh, this is how everyone else should be doing it.
right. So basically what happened was I have all this trade-in credit and I was like, cool. I want to well, first off, I wanted to do was I wanted to do trade in per because I traded in the MacBook earlier on because I was afraid I traded the MacBook a while ago because I knew I was going to trade in for an iPad Air. I just didn't know when I was going to do it, but I knew that new MacBooks were coming out, so I traded
In
in my
that case,
MacBook.
the value would go down. Yeah.
Right. So I traded my MacBook before my new MacBook dropped, and then during the holidays they increased the trade-in value of like certain iPads, and the mini's part of those. So my plan was to go into an Apple store, trade in the iPads in person because I mailed in the MacBook, and it took like a couple weeks, and so I would rather hand my iPads to the person at the store, have them look it over, and then I that's done, and then they just give me an iPad and I walk out the door. Right.
Right.
That was my plan. Super easy, super simple. Problem is that
Lockdowns.
California, yeah, the problem is California. Uh, I think in December they re-locked, or they reclosed all their Apple stores. It was open for a little while, but then once California started spiking again, they closed them all down.
Yeah, I want to say they
Anyway,
were open for like bit around. I want to say it was like around New Year, Christmas. I think you could go into an Apple store real
yeah.
briefly.
So I know that there's a lot of rumors about Apple products coming out in March with the new presentation and things like that. And so I was like, I got to get this done before these potentially new iPads come out. Like I gotta figure this out.
Right,
So
because the
uh,
iPad Mini is rumored for March.
right. So I was like, I gotta do this. So I was like trying to figure it out, and I was like, man, the store is closed. Like I don't know what to do. So I messaged the Apple Store support, and I was like, look, here's my situation. Like I need to know, are the stores gonna be open? Are the prices dropping? Like what's going on? Right. Like I know he probably can't answer, but like I just need to ask.
Yeah.
I need to figure this out. And so I was like, what's the worst that's gonna happen, right? So he goes, I don't know, but I understand your concern, blah blah blah. But hey, we can just do the trade in where I send you the iPads, I send you your new iPad, and we'll send you a kit with it so that you can just send in your trade ins like at the same time. So there's no wasted time in you getting your
Oh,
iPad.
perfect.
And then, hey, since we're closed and it's like unprecedented, and I understand your concerns and like your frustrations, whatever, with it, which I'm not frustrated at all, but
Yeah.
whatever, right? He's like, hey, with your frustrations, I'm gonna throw in a free folio case for you as well.
Nice.
And I was like, cool. He's like, is that okay? I was like, yeah, dude, totally fine. He goes, great. I'm gonna have to charge you for the folio case a little bit though, just because I can't give out stuff for free. I was like, cool. What I was like, what do you have to charge me? He goes, oh, 25 cents. Is that fine? I was like,
What
yeah.
the
I was like, let's
hell?
go.
Oh my
I
god.
was
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah, no, charge me a quarter, please.
yeah, I was like, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Um, but yeah, so that was great. Um, so yeah, Apple Sport is really good. Really happy about
No, that's awesome. I also had some iPad updates. I mean, if you're watching, you can actually see it on camera.
it. Yeah,
I got one of
so good.
the new Magic keyboard, or not new at this point, they're
Okay.
almost a year old. One of the Magic keyboards for the iPad, and I believe it would work with your iPad Air too.
Yes, it does.
And I didn't expect it to make as much of an impact in how I used my iPad as it has made. Mainly because like the big thing and reason why I had wanted one anyway had been when I was commuting, it would just be like everything I could use or need with the iPad would be all in one convenient little package. It's a case, it's a keyboard, whatever.
Sure.
I happened to think Walmart of all places had it on sale for $100 off, which given how much they
Oh,
charge
that's
for,
really good.
yeah, given how much they charge for the uh, Magic Keyboard, that's like significant. I mean, $100
Right.
off
It's
is
like a
always
third of
going to be
it.
significant, but yeah, like it dropped it by a third, and I was just like, yes, yes, please. And because there are some things I do for work where, especially because Instagram is still like the worst if you have to handle multiple accounts, given how they integrate with Facebook, just social media management things. So being able to not sit there and go, crap, which Bluetooth keyboard is paired to which computer and which
Mhm.
iPad? It's just like, oh, it's that. But
You can watch it.
also like the mouse control, it's so weird to think about how you could how good of a job they did with a mouse. Like you'd think it would be just as simple as a point click interface, you're done. But the UI aspects of how the mouse
Yeah.
works is just kind of like there's obviously a level of thought that Apple put in that I don't think anyone expected, but speaks also to how even though Apple hasn't been, batting 100% recently when it comes to some of their design decisions, it's like this is one of those cases where it's like, oh yeah, this is a kind of product that only Apple could make, where everything just kind of works and makes sense and just helps the overall package and everything just interacts and works great together beyond
Yeah.
just like oh yeah, you can sync a Bluetooth mouse to it or sync a Bluetooth keyboard. It just is It's so weird to sit here and talk about how making the iPad more like a laptop is like crazy, but just the fact, like, I'm gonna do it right now real quick. Like, now my iPad is disconnected and I literally just had to quickly, like, a light pull. And I love using my iPad as like a to watch video or read a book or anything like that, to where I don't often need the keyboard, and being able to just quickly and easily disconnect it and not have to worry about it is half the reason I wanted it. So
Yeah,
yeah, big thumbs
you
up
gotta
for
let me
me.
know how it goes. You gotta let me know because it's something that I am keeping an eye on of like because I got to try it when Apple stores well before all this world went to shit. I did get to go to an Apple store and try the Magic Keyboard, and it's something that's so like you said, it's like a really different kind of special experience to use one.
Yeah,
Uh,
if I think
and
the
like
no, go
continue.
ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and so the idea that like it is something that I'm looking at, and I'm like, cool. I would want this, but I need to see how I use the new iPad and how like my workflow needs it or if it's necessary before I like drop that much cash on something that's like
Right.
pretty
It's
superfluous.
you need a damn good reason to spend $300 on this thing.
Right.
Is how I feel about it. And I bought it because, again, like, I knew there was one time a couple years ago where I had to leave, like, I had to go to Idaho for a funeral. And but it was also like a weekend that I couldn't not be working. And I only took my iPad with me. And it worked fine. But if this is also pre Magic Keyboard, if the Magic Keyboard had existed then, that would have made my life so much easier. Because when I did that, I had to take my, because I don't have like another keyboard case of any way, I had to take my keyboard and, I didn't have a mouse. I don't think mice connectivity even worked yet in the iPad when that happened. It was just like, it wasn't a bad work experience, but if I had the Magic Keyboard, it would have been a not like the negatives would have been completely wiped away. I also
Sure.
find when I use it, it is the most convenient of all things is not necessarily as the keyboard, but when I am working and it's sitting on my desk and I want to like check something on my iPad, like it's often easier if I have all my keyboards and computer set up to just kind of reach over and use the mouse, the trackpad, instead of having to like even go through like the screens. It's like weird little things like that where it just enabled me to do a few things a little bit easier. Also, if you do anything writing wise, that having a keyboard is great. But I think if I was buying a new iPad and I was told you could get the pencil or the Magic Keyboard, but not both, I think right now I'd actually go with the Magic Keyboard over the pencil because of just how I use my iPad and what I use it for. Like, I did the little lower thirds this morning on my iPad. Like, so I'm doing some typing on a regular basis. But if you're not doing that at all, if you're not using an iPad in like a work manner in any way, shape, or form, probably not worth it. But
Right.
yeah, if you're like, oh, it's going to be like my secondary computing device alongside my desktop, then I'd actually say it's really worth considering.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pencil. I have a pencil already. I got that for free from like, well, I guess not free, but it's like the credit card points or whatever
Hmm.
stuff. So I've had that for like a long time. It's just been chilling, waiting for the iPad to come. The pencil's like, dude, are you gonna order me the fucking
Yeah,
iPad? Like, it's waiting.
that's the thing. I love using the pencil, but I use it so rarely
Right,
that if I lost the pencil, it wouldn't necessarily heavily impact my iPad usage. I mean, you could say the same thing if I lost the keyboard. I mean, I didn't have the Magic Keyboard for a long time, but it made some of my work just easier. It just
right.
like the quality of life aspect of it is, I think, the big thing for it. You can hobble together an approximate, or you could get like one of the Logitech ones, but like being able to quickly undock my iPad and go is really nice. Like, this was kind of what I wanted from a keyboard case anyway. Like, I never liked the idea of the iPad being always in the keyboard case, and given how I use my iPad, that would have sucked.
Right.
But yeah, no, big props to the Magic Keyboard. So yeah, I think for you, it just is a matter of, are you using it? Is it something that you're just using as for casual use, or is it, if it becomes like a work device, then the Magic Keyboard's worth thinking about. If your iPad isn't going to be a work device in any way, shape, or form, like your kid's school laptop, instead of a laptop, get them the iPad type thing, then yeah, you would want something like the Magic Keyboard. But other than that,
Right.
like, and that's also the power of the iPad. It kind of, unlike a laptop or a desktop, the iPad can kind of work however you want it to.
Yeah.
And everything Apple's done has just been building upon that idea. To steal from John Siracusa, who's a programmer and tech guy who does podcasting too. It's the naked robotic core. Like, the iPad is like the core of the system, and you can augment it in a variety of ways to suit your uses. So if you don't need the keyboard, it still works. If you don't need the pencil, it still works. You could just have it on its own and it works. Everything else is this actually something that I'll use?
Right.
But yeah, big thumbs up from me. Especially if you can get it on sale. Like, its
definitely.
price
That's
point,
a huge thing.
Its price point is a tough pill to swallow. And
If it was hard to justify.
Yeah, if it was only $50 off, I don't think I would have got it. It's literally the $100 off, and the fact I knew I would eventually end up wanting one once things return to like I can leave the house situation. It's like, yeah, like it's worth it now. But yeah, it's like I'd be really hard pressed to buy it brand new for full price.
Right.
But let's move on. So, boom. No more, because we switched systems, no more like janky, I'm running this off the keyboard across the room. I can just like use an app now. Hey, I'm moving on up in the world. All right. So, even though we just spent a lot of time talking about tech, our first official tech topic. More trolling than anything. r/WallStreetBets. Another instance of me seeing something happening when it's starting to take off and going, I'll look into that later. And then it becomes so big and I'm like, damn it, I missed the boat. Because I had a similar thing when Bitcoin first started out. I remember hearing about Bitcoin before like anyone else did. But I was like, that just sounds stupid. And so I never got Bitcoin. And then, of course, Bitcoin became huge. And I'm like, oh, man, I could have, done nothing and had a ton of money out of it.
Right.
But how familiar are you with the GameStop thing?
Well, I'm pretty familiar. The thing that's funny when we're talking about Bitcoin is I had one Bitcoin in like, because back in the day, Bitcoin was like not worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like the default like esports prize, when like, you either win money or like lower tier you win like Bitcoin. So like Team Liquid posted this 2 days ago and it's hilarious. It's like, hey, it marks the 10th anniversary of our $4 million Brood War tournament, and it goes first place $500, second place $250, third place $150, fourth place $100, and fifth through eighth place get 25 Bitcoin each.
And fifth through eighth place ended up making more money if they just sat on it.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, I got rid of all my Bitcoin before it even blew up. So like, I'm dumb. But I mean,
yeah,
you never know.
Well, that's the thing, is when Bitcoin first started, it was very easy to kind of hand wave away because it just was like, it had very little value, and the amount of effort to get any, it was just like, you mean I have to set up this whole thing on my computer to like, and run it all the time? And it was just like, for something that most people don't think has any value at all. It's like, yeah, sure. And then it blows up, and it's just like, son of a bitch. If I just spent 5 minutes setting it up, I could have made like a Bitcoin and then walked away with like thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And similarly with GameStop, if I had gone, you know what? No, screw it. I'm going to just buy some stock right now. Could have bypassed that and walked away with a pretty penny. Why don't you probably are more familiar with it than I am? Why don't you give the breakdown of what happened with GameStop?
So basically, the trying to think of the best way to explain it. It all revolves around your understanding of shorts and short selling and squeezing. But essentially, there's a Redditor, like a kind of amateur investor that noticed that a lot of the hedge funds were shorting GameStop.
Oh yeah, like I want to say it was like something like 70% of GameStop shares at one point were being like shorted. Yeah.
Right. So he convinced like most of our WallStreetBets and the Discord and the Reddit to go in and also short GameStop and do a squeeze on the hedge funds. And it worked.
Really well.
really, really well. And of course, once the momentum started going, it got even worse and worse and worse for the hedge funds.
Yeah, I think some hedge funds lost billions of dollars because of this.
Right.
Notice how no one is crying for the hedge funds.
No. And again, it goes. The only people that are mad are the hedge funds and people that were like, this is the thing going around and kind of the sentiment going around where that Wall Street doesn't like when you play its games and beat it.
Yeah.
And win. And so that's sort of like the reasoning behind that. And then where you kind of get into the other stuff was that Robinhood and a lot of the other app services were trying to help the hedge funds. And
well, it's actually weirder than that, in that there is some question of foul play, but also a lot of these apps they use, it's like Apex Exchange or something like that. I might have the name wrong. But this was a company that they worked with to do like their dollar trading thing. Like they were actually partnering with, I don't think it was a hedge fund, but there was some other company that they were partnering with to actually be able to run that. And that company stopped them from running GameStop and AMC.
Yeah. Well, the reason for foul play and why it's a little more, not believable, but why there's a precedent for it is that Robinhood doesn't make its money off of day traders and people like the everyday person trading. Robinhood makes the majority of its money selling that information to hedge funds.
Mm-hmm.
So Robinhood, when you use Robinhood, it's very apparent and it's public information of what is being traded and what its users are doing. And so then when you have that available, information, the thing that's interesting to see is like, okay, now the hedge funds can play around that.
Chris, did we just lose you? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you now. You got quiet and then robot-y for a second.
Oh, okay. You can hear me now, right?
Yeah, I can hear you now just fine.
Okay, perfect. What was the last thing that you heard?
The hedge funds can play around.
Yeah, so the hedge funds can play around that information that they're getting from Robinhood so they understand the market better. But of course, that information isn't publicly available. It's only available because the hedge funds bought it, right? So
yeah,
it is an unlevel playing field. So what this did was really level the playing field, and the hedge funds and rich people that are used to abusing the system didn't like that. So
yeah, it is because the crazy thing with shorting is, if you're not familiar with it, shorting is basically a trick you can do through Like the specifics of it are
betting
weird, but
against the stock.
you're betting against the stock, you're betting against the company, and GameStop, because GameStop has been having a lot of trouble, is like, I mean, until this past week, I would have been like, yeah, of course someone's shorting GameStop.
Yeah.
Like it's like, how much longer does this company have? But the problem is the people who do that type of thing, the short sellers, they are typically like, they have a lot of FU money. And they're trying to make a profit off like essentially the downfall of a company and all of the jobs that go with it. It's, the type of people who do it aren't, especially with the hedge funds, it's like you have like a lot of questionable morality. Because there's a lot of just for the money. And so they're banking on this company failing in its stock market, its stock price tanking. And so if all of a sudden a bunch of people are like, kind of like, no, screw you, we're going to start buying the stock. They didn't just have shorts in the sense that they were banking on it selling. If you are shorting a stock, if the price of the stock increases, you actually have to kind of pay for it. So they were essentially having to buy stock as the price went up. So it was costing them, their shorts were starting to cost them billions, because as it's approaching like $200+, they're having to buy that stock to offset their future short. So they're expending billions on a company that they think is going to fail.
Right. So here's I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I was trying to explain to everyone, and then this came out, and I was like, yes, this is exactly it. The example of short selling, the way to understand short selling for gamers or MMO people. Do you see this on Twitter?
No, I haven't, but I have a feeling the moment you say it, I'm going to be like, yes, that's right.
Okay, so basically here I'll read the whole thing. So it says, so basically this is what short selling is, right? So it says, me, can I borrow a bunch of gold bars and I promise to give them back to you? And you say, sure. I sell the gold bars for 50 gold a piece, and I wait a week. Then I buy the gold bars back at the auction house for 10 gold, and then I give you your bars back. I just made 40 gold.
Yeah.
So basically what happened with GameStop was, can I buy, or can we have the copper bars and we give them back? He says sure. Sells them on the auction house for 50 gold. Waits a week. Sorry, 100. Now the copper bars are 10,000 gold. And then the guy asks for his copper bars back, right?
Yeah.
So now, basically the guy has to now buy a ton of copper bars, or he's gonna get kicked from his guild. Now, every time he tries to buy more copper bars to cover his ass, it drives the price up even more and puts it even more in the hole. On top, everyone on the server has realized how screwed this guy is, and everyone's buying up as many copper bars as possible,
because fuck
price
that
up
guy
even more. Yeah, because fuck that guy. And so then also it's pretty public knowledge of when he's gonna have to cough up the copper bars to his guildmates, meaning there's almost an infinite amount of leverage at play.
Yes. And here's my kick myself thing. I first saw the GameStop stuff going on when it hit $20. And I was just like, well, I'm sure, they've had their lulls. It's going to go back down. Like the next day, it was like $200. And I was like, son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. I could have bought stock. Yeah, buy low, sell high.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
You know it. We all know it. It's, if you ever go into like anything with stocks, it's buy low, sell high. And here is like the prime case example of where it's going to keep going up, but you're like, well, how much higher can it go? Should have bought that stock. I seriously should have bought that stock.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I was in the same boat.
Where it's just like, you can see it happening. You can see Reddit working its magic. And if you spend a lot of time on Reddit, you're like, oh yeah, Reddit can run something into the ground. And so the question is, at what point has it actually run it into the ground? At what point do we start posting the gif of the guy beating the dead horse? I was just like, oh, they've had their laugh for a day. I'm sure and Reddit didn't move on. It was like, no.
No. It still happened, yeah.
So yeah, no, it shot up like a lot of money. But Yeah, it's so crazy. AMC was another stock they did that with, and it raised enough funds for AMC that it removed some of their concerns about debt due to to the COVID closures. Like that's like they
Yeah.
turned around the fortune of AMC because again, AMC was getting shorted by a lot of these companies because again, they're assholes and they're thinking, "Oh, the theaters are having it tough. I'm going to short their stock because who knows, they might not survive the pandemic. Let's bet on it." And that of course doesn't help, but if all of a sudden a bunch of people GameStop their way through the AMC stock, they're like it bought AMC some financial security. It is so absurd how like that changed where it literally was in one day AMC was like, nope, actually things aren't bad anymore. The future is bright and shiny. It's just
super cool. I'm really excited that some companies are able to use this sort of meme stock status as a way to turn things around.
Yeah. I mean, that all said, I'm not going to sit there and short GameStop. Like, I don't want to, like, to short a stock, you have to actually be like, my life is playing the stock market. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't bet money on GameStop being around. Like, that's a stock I would have bought and then dumped. It's dropping
absolutely.
down.
You're not going to keep it.
No. And I think that's the thing that pissed off the hedge funds is the fact that they knew that a lot of the forces driving this was just like a fuck you to them.
Yeah.
Like you guys
they
manipulate
just don't like it.
Yeah. They don't like the fact because here's the thing with the stock market. The stock market isn't the economy. What people, when they buy stock, what someone who makes money off the stock market wants is a stock that is going to have like a decent return on investment quarter over quarter. And that's really it. They kind of want profit to keep going up. They want the stock price to keep going up in a reflection of that so they can keep making money. This is why you see lots of headlines where, oh, the stock market price tanked on this scene after they reported like quarterly losses. It's like, it says nothing about the future of the company. It's just that they were like, my quick buck. Or how oftentimes you'll see stock prices go up after layoffs. Companies having financial trouble, they laid off 75,000 people. Its stock goes up in Wall Street. It's like, yeah, I don't really think the economy of that company really went up when they laid off 75,000 people. Like, that's like a bad thing. And so the stock market is divorced from the economic reality that we all live in. And so there's a reason why, like, kind of like fuck you to hedge funds is, fuck them. They are so concerned about making a dollar that they celebrate layoffs. Like, these aren't great people. Like,
no, and it goes down to the thing of I love seeing all the complaints from hedge fund managers and from like wealthy investors that are like, well, they're just they have no like there's no logical reason for them to be investing in GameStop. Like, it doesn't make any kind of sense. It's like, because that's how the market works. It's all dependent on what people do, and right now they're doing this. So you have like the reason for them investing is because it's going up. Like, there's no logical explanation needed.
We all know, everyone who was paying attention to it, I think, knew deep down that it was all just gaming the system. Like, I don't think that,
but I mean, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. Like,
they were just mad that they weren't the ones who rigged the game. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
like
100%.
If they were the ones who had rigged that game and they had walked away with billions of dollars instead of spending billions of dollars, this would not be getting the headlines. It might get a thought piece in like Forbes, but no one would care, give a shit. But the moment they get games, everyone throws a fit, stuff gets shut down. It's like, there's a reason why there's still a lot of animosity towards banks and financial institutions, even like 10 plus years out of the Great Recession.
Yep.
Fuck you. Sincerely, everyone else. And so them like hearing that one stock, like one hedge fund lost $5 billion. Cry me a goddamn river. I want to fucking paddle that goddamn river and then bathe in it and rejoice because fuck you. Yeah.
It's real good.
That said, I actually opened up one of my. I opened up. I've been doing my 401k through work, but I opened up a Roth IRA like 3 weeks ago.
There you go.
Speaking of stocks, hey.
Yeah, I think we did that. I think we did one like about, God, I want to say like 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, I should get this done. It's like your retirement is prudent, but it doesn't change the fact that like on the day-to-day aspect of the stock market, it's so divorced from reality that
Yeah.
like I threw money in there. I have no clue what it's worth anymore. I just know how much I put in.
Yeah. And again,
that's how you should do it.
That's kind of the best way to do it, because you can't panic, and you gotta, you do have to kind of trust the people that whatever firm that you put your money into, that and whatever broker you're going with, that they're gonna make the right decisions for you and what your portfolio looks like. And like I told Jenny, because Jenny's a worrier, and we were like, well, don't check it all the time. Like, just leave it alone.
Don't think of it as a bank account. Don't think of
Yeah.
it as money in a bank. Like this is like it is.
It's gonna ebb and flow, and like you're gonna be okay. Like, you just don't worry about it.
I look at it as like whenever you go to like Disneyland, like that's how I kind of rationalize this. It's like I put money into a retirement fund, and as far as I need to operate, that money just doesn't exist.
Right.
Like I should treat it as if it's gone, because as much as, yeah, that's, not an insignificant amount of money when you open up a retirement fund, it's still at the same time, if you watch it every single day, you're actually going to be negatively impacting its ability to like function. Because it's not how much money it has today, it's how much money it has, in my case, like 35 years from now. It's
Right.
and it should, be fine. So, yeah, stocks. Open retirement funds, fuck hedge funds, and yeah. Let's move on to your fun bit, because I saw all this stuff going on, and I was like, I'm sure Chris wants to talk about it.
Oh my God, I'm freaking out.
Like, I'm trying to avoid some of these details, honestly, because I know I'm going to buy it, but I still really do want, and hopefully we can make it work, because we've talked about how we want to do something with this. I kind of really do want my first experience with this game to be our planned playthrough, where I kind of tell you what to do. And so I've been trying to like avoid a lot of the details, because
so you can
things
still
don't
you
really
can watch,
impact me, but
you can watch the trailer and stuff. Like, the trailer made me cry. You probably won't have the emotional reaction to it, but like I would check out some of the. Have you seen the trailer, and have you seen the graphic comparison?
I haven't. I just know that everyone was going gaga about it, and I was just like,
Yeah, so
like yeah. Go on.
So it's something we haven't seen a lot of Mass Effect 2 or 3 yet. We've seen a little bit. A majority of the focus, of course, was obviously on Mass Effect 1, because that's the game that needs the most work.
Yeah, as we've talked about, like I got 20 minutes in and just stopped playing because I just like the controls were just
So they've brought the gameplay more in line with Mass Effect 2 and 3, which is great. They changed up the UI so it's more in line. Obviously, there's still a different feel to it, but they've just kind of made the series a little more cohesive, because Mass Effect 1 was really RPG based and very much. And like, it was more RPG than it was shooter, in terms of how the other games were very, very shooter. But overall, like, they've kind of just they haven't taken away the RPG elements, but they've just brought it more in line, where, okay, now we understand how to make a shooter. We understand how this game works. And so they did that. The most crazy thing to look at is the graphical comparison. So obviously it's not a remake, it is a remaster. And this is like a distinction that I keep having to make to people of like, because right now the gaming industry, I guess for the past couple generations, but especially now, the idea of remake versus remaster is like something that I feel like a casual audience doesn't really quite understand. So like,
Oh yeah, it's an important distinction, and I can see how
yeah,
people make the mistake. But a remake is a remake, as if nothing that came like yes, it is based on something that came before, but nothing that came before is like canon.
being used.
Yeah, to that
No, it's nothing
story.
being used. So like, well, basically what it is like a remaster. You're basically taking the original code and just sort of like prettying up assets or cleaning up assets or like putting in new stuff.
A good example of like a remaster is the Halo Master Chief Collection.
Right. Where it's the game is built on top of the original game. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just a new coat of paint almost.
Yes.
Um and again that's underselling it because remasters do so much more. But I mean
Yes.
that's the easiest way for me to describe it. Where a remake, you're starting from scratch. You're taking the story and you're taking like what the game is, but you're remaking it from scratch. None of the original code is being used. Um, and
I guess
so,
here's my because I don't follow it close enough, but my understanding is the Tomb Raider, at least the past few, was a remake.
no.
Not no.
So that's a reboot.
Okay.
So like a remaster would be something like Resident Evil 2. So the new Resident Evil 2 was it's the same story, it's the same game essentially as the original PS1 title, but it's completely remade for on modern consoles. So none of the original code is used. The same story, the same beats, it's the same game, but
Got
the
it. Okay.
gameplay and everything else is completely the same, right? So something like the Tomb Raider, the story is completely different. You're just basically retelling. It's like the difference between Batman '89 and Batman Begins,
Okay.
right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, it's just the origin of Batman,
Got
but
it.
they're very different in terms of how they're approached and how they're made and whatever it is, right? And the style of the movie and the gameplay of it is completely different. Where the remake is this is the same game, but they started from scratch.
Cool. Cool.
So like something like Resident Evil Final Fantasy VII remake, like that is a remake of the original game. Um, and again, like a remaster is just again like you brought up, like the Halo Master Chief, Halo Anniversary Edition, and then Halo 2, the edition that's in the Master Chief Collection. Um,
Yeah. Did
so
they ever
like all
do a
that, all
remaster of Halo 3? Not that I think they
no, they
needed
did
it,
not.
but yeah.
No, they only did 1 and 2 because those are the original Xbox games.
And they weren't in
Um,
HD.
right. So like Halo 3 was the first one on 360, so like that one's totally fine. It's in HD. It looks fine. But Halo 1 and 2 without those upgrades look a little rough. But yeah, it's something to look out for. But yeah, going and looking at the screenshot comparisons of Mass Effect 1 versus the Legendary Edition, which is what they're calling it. It's so interesting to look at because, well, okay, for me, I have them installed on Steam on my PC, and there's a ton of mods that I use that are texture mods and shader mods and just things to make it look nice.
Yeah.
So my Mass Effect 1 through 3 already look great. I have there's downloads you can have that put 4K textures that make not ray tracing, but like they make it just
Right.
look pretty.
Yeah, I've done that with a couple
And
games too.
yeah, and so when I've played those games in recent years, those are what I have on. So I don't remember what Mass Effect 1 looks like without all that stuff. And so the Legendary Edition looks pretty much like what I play on a PC with all of my mods, with my hundreds and hundreds of mods, and like it's pretty insane to think about. The Mass Effect 1 base game is like, I think it's like 8 gigs or something like that on Steam, but the texture pack that I have installed is like 50 gigs. And so looking at the trailer for the Legendary Edition and going like, oh wow, this is beautiful, blah blah blah, but like, it looks I didn't think much about it, and then they dropped a couple of screenshots about like, oh, here's what the original, like, here's versus the original game, and I went, holy shit, the original game looks so bad in comparison. And you're like, wow, okay, I now understand like everything that they're doing, and it's really cool to see. But yeah, obviously there's gameplay stuff and a couple of changes that are like good quality of life changes, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, like I'm super excited to sit down and have you play that with you and like really sit and explore it, because again, I think those games are really special. It's funny too to think like the idea that people will complain about anything, and like obviously there's two controversial things that they're doing with the game. There is there's in Mass Effect 2, there's a character called Miranda, who you'll meet, and the sort of famous thing about Miranda is there's a lot of shots in there that are like they're like, they're the typical cinematic shots of her walking into a room, but it's from like a lower angle, so it's just like a shot of her ass.
Oh, okay.
Right, and like that sort of like became the iconic, because Miranda, she was genetically modified to be perfect. So like that's a big part of her character, of like she is genetically perfect. So her whole being and who she is as a person is being perfect. And so that's kind of her flaw, right? As a character, as a person. And so a lot of her storylines in the games are focused around that. And so yeah, so having like shots of her ass and like all this kind of stuff was like part of that character's. I understand the argument, right? But I also understand that a lot of it was like superfluous.
Where it's
there's
just
some
like
angles and some.
Yeah, you're like, male gaze much?
Yeah. So like there's certain things where like, okay, I understand 1 or 2 shots of this to like establish the point, right? Like I understand like, okay, this is like maybe her character introduction, you're like, oh, okay, I get what this character is all about, right? Maybe like 1 or 2, but like they announced that they're toning down a lot of that, because they don't feel like it's necessary.
There is using it to establish some aspect of the character, or then there is gratuitous shot for wankers, really.
Right, and so a lot of people were mad about that. And again, I don't really care. It's fine as long as you're not completely getting rid of it, because again, it's something that is iconic and something that like I don't want to say is important to the character, but like it helps you understand and establish the character.
It sounds like they recognize and appreciate that there was a reason behind some of it, but at the same time also recognizing, there's that leaned way too much into it, to the point of being like she's just there for sexual gratification.
Right. And again, that is part of her character, right? So again, I do understand like them keeping some of it, but like I also understand them getting rid of a lot of it. The second kind of controversial thing was it includes all DLC but 1. It's
Is
called
this the one that they
Station.
lost?
Yeah,
I heard about
Pinnacle
that.
Station. Pinnacle Station was a DLC that no one liked, no one enjoyed. It is a terrible DLC. It was basically like a test bed for their eventual multiplayer feature, which, hey, Mass Effect 3 multiplayer is some of the best multiplayer I've ever played in my entire life. And I still log in to play it every once in a while. It's incredible. It's so good. But the DLC was like a watered down, like, you should come try out our multiplayer version of like they forced the single player. They forced multiplayer into the single player mode so that like people would be tempted to try it. And it's really, really bad and it's terrible. And so there's really no reason to have it in there. It serves zero story purpose, but also a clean copy of that DLC doesn't exist. They can't find clean code to like res it up and fix it and do whatever. It just doesn't exist. And
Yeah, I
so
remember hearing about that. Like, there's a part of me that goes, "How does that happen?" But then again, having managed media for, video, totally also understands how it could happen, especially when it's something no one cares about.
yeah, and again, it was like they pulled out assets from the multiplayer and just threw them into the single player as like a hey, you guys might like this as just like extra content. And so again, it wasn't like it was given a lot of attention or like love to in the first place. So yeah, I totally get why it doesn't exist and people were mad about it. And I was like, why is anyone mad about it? Like this doesn't make
Just because they
sense
want it to
as
be
to why.
complete. That's really what it is they just wanted it to be complete. So they're trying to say it's
Yeah.
incomplete. And it's just like,
And it's
if
like,
this is a
no.
content that everyone hated, including like the studio, and it just like, you can't, like, if you can't find the original code and it's like for one of the most popular games of the past 15 years, there's probably a reason you can't find the code.
Yeah, it's really bad. And so again, I don't that's something where it's like, God, people complain about anything.
Yes. But no, I saw those details. I should look into it. Like the little bits I've been seeing, it seems like everyone who loves Mass Effect is getting excited, including you, which makes me get a little excited because I have stuff we've planned. So it's just,
Well, I will tell you this now, Logan, that just knowing you and knowing the person that you are, the once you dive into this world, you're all in. Like you will be
yeah,
all in.
and that's the thing is like you've said that to me before, or in a sense where it's like once you actually get past gameplay, and since you would be running it, that's like not even an issue for me. It's like you're gonna just be all in, and it's just like probably, like I'm not
Well,
even
because
gonna
like
contest that.
some of these characters are genuinely some of the best, in my opinion, some of the greatest characters ever written. Like they're so in any form of media, like they're so this game, the world that they built is so special, and the characters that they have in here is so great that like, and again, it's so your style of storytelling where it's like, God, this game is so good.
Okay, like I honestly can't wait. Like the literally the only good thing about the pandemic shutdown is the fact that it meant that we had to delay for this legendary edition release. But I was so
Right.
disappointed because we were legit planning to shoot this last summer. Like
Yeah. Like
it,
I was gonna spend like days at Logan's house playing through these games.
like or I was sitting there like March before everything went down, like I was sitting here trying to figure out like a production schedule, and it just to like I hadn't even got to the point where had run the production schedule past you or James to be like, hey, is this going to work? Before everything just was like, yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that like we had to delay it. But hey, at least we can play this new edition. Maybe my first playthrough of this first one of this new one would be on the show.
That'd be cool.
Um,
Like
yeah,
we'll ham it up for the camera, and by ham it up for the camera, probably me going, oh my god, this is awesome, to the camera constantly.
it's so good. It's so
All
good.
right. Speaking of like cool science fiction video games, Star Wars. Because I was sick 2 weeks ago and we didn't broadcast, we didn't talk about the Star Wars news when it comes to gaming. With the announcement of Lucasfilm Games, which is holy crap, thank God. Like, are you in the same boat
Yeah.
as I am, where it's kind of like, thank God? And it's not, this isn't a slight at EA, even though I'm sure we're going to be bashing on them throughout this. But I remember, like, one of my favorite games of, like, Star Wars games is Empire at War, which is a
Yeah.
real-time strategy Star Wars game. And I remember reading somewhere, like, it in the past couple of years actually got an update to enable multiplayer over Steam. Like there is still an active player base for this game, and it's 15, if not older. And in order to get that done, the team, like I think Petroglyph is still actually around. They're the game company that made the game, and they apparently even went to Disney going, "We would love to make more," but EA had the license, and now that Lucasfilm Games, where it looks like what's happened, instead of just giving the Star Wars license to one studio, Lucasfilm is now picking and choosing studios to make games. That means games like Empire at War become viable again, because it's not like EA is having to sit there and rationalize the expenditure of the Star Wars license. Like a smaller studio can sit there and be like, we make really good real-time strategy games. Let's talk to Lucasfilm and see if we can't do one in Star Wars. And now it's like doable again, which is why I'm excited.
I think I'm excited to see sort of where we go now. That like Lucasfilm, well, not just Lucasfilm. I think Disney. When Disney and Lucasfilm signed the deal with EA, it's very much under the idea that, hey, we want to be hands off.
Mm-hmm.
We want you guys to handle everything and just use the IP how you feel is necessary. And obviously, EA has all these studios and all these partners that, okay, you guys are good enough to make these creative decisions and use your studios and use your talent to make a wide variety of games.
Like the idea behind it would be, because EA was so big, you wouldn't need like an in-house Lucasfilm Games division that was overseeing and managing all this, because EA has a studio for everything.
Right. And so what came of that was a couple of third-person shooters, a mobile game, or a couple mobile games, and
quite a few mobile games, actually.
Yeah. The most notable is a very good character collection game, but I won't get into that. But then a really good action adventure game that was worked on for a long time. But then a lot of cancellations.
And then Combat Simulator.
Yeah, and a flight sim.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. That's all we got in 10 years. Which is really crazy.
Nothing compared to like the heyday of Star Wars games, where there were like a couple Star Wars games a year.
Yeah, so pretty bad. I think everyone can agree that was pretty much a failure as a partnership, as a deal. But what I was saying was, so when that deal was struck, that was sort of the Disney of like, we want to be hands off. We want you guys to handle it, whatever.
Well, I think that
Disney's kind of taking.
Disney historically has always like had mixed luck with gaming.
Yeah, so that's again why I don't blame them for wanting to do that, and like again, I understand their logic and their understanding of it, but they've seen now with what they're doing with Marvel that there is some something to be said for having to choose partners, the right partners. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So like what they've done with Insomniac Studios and Spider-Man, right? Choosing them to do this game, choosing Square Enix to do the Avengers game, working with Nintendo to do Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. There's so many really good choices that they're making with their IPs and with what studio is doing what, where now they're starting to reap the benefits and understand like, oh, it's not just about giving one studio like the IP and then letting them run with it and give ideas. It's handing it off to the right people, right? Like a lot like choosing directors and writers, and like choosing who's going to make this movie. Choosing who's going to make the game is just as important, and like that changed in the gaming landscape because this wasn't true 10, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so now it is, and I think that now with you can start to see now that then start to choose the studios, and like even what they're doing now with some of these rumors, like all this stuff sounds great, and I'm excited to see what they can do now with sort of a more hands-on approach, right?
And I think the important thing to remember is this doesn't preclude EA from continuing to make Star Wars games.
Yeah,
Like, I would
absolutely
not be
not. Like,
shocked if there's a Battlefront 3 if it's still DICE. There's been rumors for a while that there might be work going on a Jedi Fallen Order 2. Like, it's like that is stuff that is going to be within EA.
yeah, and again, there's no problem there. It was just the exclusivity that was limiting what was able to be possible. And again, like EA is as much as people shit on EA, EA has some fantastic partners and some fantastic studios underneath them that I would love to see make certain Star Wars games. But I mean, they don't have everything, and there's certain things that I would like. Like I would love for BioWare to get a chance to do Knights of the Old Republic again.
Yeah.
Like if we got a
like a real
3,
actual Knights of the Old Republic, not a.
Like if we got KOTOR 3, I would flip out. I mean, there's a lot of
would be what I would expect if BioWare got back into that. This is pure rumor speculation. Logan theorizing. Given like, have you read any of High Republic yet, or is that still on your to read list?
I've read some of it. I've read a lot of like synopses and stuff. I like it. I think it's good.
I haven't read. I'm surprised I haven't sit down to read Claudia Gray's book. I pre-ordered it because I love Claudia Gray's Star Wars writing, and I keep literally, honestly, what happened is I forgot that it came out this past week, which is probably a good thing because it meant I was, not just reading Star Wars instead of paying attention to anything else. Right. But I remember reading it, and one of my first thoughts was, oh, there's a lot of stuff in Knights of the Old Republic that won't work anymore. Not in terms of storyline, but like in how the technology functions. It's like, if they go back to Knights of the Old Republic, they're going to have to do a lot of like rethinking how that world works. Not rethinking the story being told, but rethinking the world it is playing within.
How it operates.
Because I think this is a point of praise I'd give to High Republic. It definitely helps convey this idea of technological progress that I think Knights of the Old Republic did not do as good of a job as it could have done. Like there's more of a sense of technological change and progress from High Republic to prequels than we ever got from Knights of the Old Republic. But my guess is if we got Knights of the Old Republic from BioWare again, I would say it's a complete total reboot.
Well, remember, there's a lot of rumors that we're getting KOTOR remastered or remade soon.
I mean, they did it with
there's a lot.
I mean, there's no reason not to. Even if it is still considered Legends and not canon, there's no reason not to.
Wait, they remade too?
If you go... This is the thing that I find so crazy. If you get Sith Lords, someone did, like, I think Obsidian did a full legit HD remaster.
Yeah.
So, like, they didn't, like, do a, like, remake or or update. Like, it was just, like, they basically were like, it now works in HD.
So there's a rumor that they're completely remaking KOTOR 1.
Honestly, one of my biggest hurdles at playing KOTOR 1, and one of the reasons I know I need to finish it. There's so many games that I need to finish. Is I find the combat kind of...
You don't like the turn-based?
It's not that I don't like turn-based. It's that I just find it kind of clunky. I'm okay with turn-based, but it's I just find it clunky, and I never got over the clunkiness aspect of it. Also, Aspire, your iPad port needs some goddamn work. It should work with the keyboard and mouse, and it doesn't work with the goddamn keyboard and mouse.
It works with controller support, doesn't it?
It does, but it's honestly... iPad controller support is amazing. Some odd reason, the iPad port of KOTOR's controller support is hot garbage. It is just like... I just want to play Knights of the Old Republic in my bed. Come on, guys. Like, do it for me. Just do it for me.
But speaking of, before we move on, speaking of games that you need to finish, did you ever get back into Cyberpunk or no?
No, I haven't gotten back into Cyberpunk because I wanted to finish Jedi Fallen Order. I haven't finished Jedi Fallen Order yet, so that is on my I need to get this shit done list.
Okay,
Is
because like,
getting through all
God,
of that.
there's so much Cyberpunk I want to talk to you about, but we can't talk about it.
Yeah, I have a feeling like once I get back into it, it's going to be like how I did Grand Theft Auto, where there's going to be just like 2 or 3 weekends where I just sit down and where I played Grand Theft Auto to beat it, because like the storyline, like I don't want to say it kicked in, but I got sucked in enough that I was just like, okay, let's go. The real problem, this is the
Right.
honest real problem, given how the real world had a lot of like shit going on in it. I was playing video games as an escape with friends, and the game we found the fastest and easiest and quickest to jump into when we wanted to play together has been Fortnite. So a lot of
Right.
my gameplay recently has been eaten up by spending time playing Fortnite, which is considerable considering I hadn't played it until a couple months ago. I've been playing a shit ton of Fortnite.
There you go.
But yeah, it's to kind of go back to Star Wars. I'm excited by like the open world game that they rumored open world game they announced, but also I think the other big thing is you could see that they're finally branching Lucasfilm. They're finally building out from just Star Wars, and that the one of the things they talked about is Bethesda's working on a Indiana Jones game.
Yeah, so when that trailer launched, I was like, there's no way they're doing this, right? There's no way. And then it shows the hat, and I was like, are you kidding me? And he lifts the hat up, and it's the whip, and I was like, oh my God, they're doing this.
It's I think this is one of those instances where EA having the license again. EA had pseudos for pretty much everything, but it doesn't change the fact that like look at what happened with I think it was what Visceral
Yeah.
doing like the open world RPG where it just kind of fell apart. You know,
Well,
EA,
so from what I heard, because that was the Amy Hennig game.
yeah, there's a yeah.
From what I heard, or from what kind of was rumored and talked about, was like that game was incredible, and it was like ready to go, but it was not. It was around the time where studios were very anti single player only,
Oh, and
and
so EA
wanted
had that multiplayer mandate of EA's has done just so much damage. Like it killed the SimCity franchise.
yeah. So again, that was around that time, and so that game got canceled solely due to it didn't have loot boxes.
Oh my god. And meanwhile, Jedi Fallen Order pretty much proved that hey, if you do a good single player narrative story,
I mean, that game still has like loot box elements.
yeah, it does. But
That's what I'm saying. And they still shoehorned it in there somehow. Where like if Visceral and Headache pushed back on like no loot boxes, then like yeah, okay, it's gonna get canceled.
yeah, that sucks. But I mean, I'm
But
glad
yeah,
that this is
I had friends that saw that game and told me that like yeah, it would have been one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
bringing her back. Lucasfilm Games.
They gotta do it again.
Just go out. You gotta do what I forget. What's the name of that movie with like you gotta bring out the jukebox, and just stand outside her window. I think is what Say Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go out, stand outside her window, and just be like, "Come on, come back. We miss you. We need you."
I don't know what she's doing now. I forget what she's doing now. She's working on something else. I can't remember what it
Didn't
is.
she go back to Sony?
I can't remember.
I know she
can't
got like
remember.
her own studio or something like some like
Yeah.
like
But I don't
she
remember
probably
what
got
she's. I think they talked about what she's working. I don't remember though. I don't know. All these things blend together.
yeah, but I mean, it's a new dawn for Star Wars games, and I'm happy for it. So basically, give me my Empire at War 2, give us our remaster of KOTOR, like you can, and that's the thing too is I know there's a lot of talk about Legends and all that. Like there are some old Star Wars games where you just have to sit there and just call it a remaster and just sit there and be like, yeah, it's not canon. I know it, you know it, we all know it. It's fine. We still love the game. Like there are so many nods to Knights of the Old Republic in Filoni's work. Just do it. Everyone there's a lot of love for that game. It doesn't have to be canon to do that.
So the interesting thing, and I think we've talked about this before, as front and center as they're putting Revan and Malik in a lot of like toys and merchandising, it tells me that
something's coming.
Because like, dude, they put out Revan's helmet as a Black Series item, and then like Revan's lightsaber and Malik's lightsaber as Force
like you could get
FX.
Revan's at Doc Ondar's, right?
Yeah.
Like something's coming.
So
is,
like,
I guess the best way I would put it. Like we know something's coming.
They wouldn't do that otherwise. And like Disney's so smart about how they're doing. Like they've been really, really good about how they're doing legacy stuff and how they're folding things back into the, like what they've done with Thrawn, right? Like they took him out of canon and then put him back in very, very quietly, and very, not quietly, but like they fit him back into the story, where I could see them doing that very easy with Malik and Revan. But again, it just depends on how they're going to hit that timeline. And there's no question in my mind something's happening with Old Republic, but we don't know what it is.
Well, I also, and this is my thing, I think the dyad thing from Rise of Skywalker, I think that is actually going to be a nod at what they're going to do with Bastila and Revan.
Yeah.
Like, that's my honest thought, is that is the moment they did the dyad thing, my first thought is, oh, they're moving to, even though we already knew about High Republic, or no, actually we didn't know about High Republic at that point.
No, that came out like
the month at, like I think like 1 or 2 months after. But like I remember seeing that and being like, this is their plan for Revan, is kind of being hinted at here. It's just a question of how they do it. I think that's honestly it. I think they know they want to bring it back and they know they're going to bring it back, but I have a feeling it's just right now, it's just a question of how, not if.
Right.
Like I honestly, for a while, even though they said that Rian Johnson's theme was going to be like a new timeline, the characters we hadn't, like, there's a part of me that wondered if Knights of the Old Republic was going to be Rian Johnson's.
Well, I said that from the beginning.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, could you imagine him doing Old Republic? Oh my God.
Yeah, and I think that might still be the case, because as much as we haven't heard much about it, as far as I'm aware, it's still on the development slate.
Yeah, they haven't said anything. There's a lot of talk that it's canceled, but like I haven't heard anything official.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, as much as everyone might talk about it being canceled, what people don't realize is that he got along really well with the Lucas story, like the development group at Lucasfilm and Kathy Kennedy, and they're the ones that make the decision, and not the fanboys on YouTube.
No, and he was one of the only directors on budget and on time.
On budget, on time, and like apparently just a pleasure to work with. Like,
I mean, he just seems like he's just the nicest person.
Right, and that's the thing from like a production, like, business standpoint. Yeah, the fan base may have like flipped and been like about his movie. It was profitable. It was on time. It was on budget. Like, he checked all of the box marks from a production standpoint. And you could argue, and I know you and I would, from a story standpoint too. So it's just like,
yeah. And the thing is, it's like, again, whether or not you agree with the story and how things happened in The Last Jedi, you cannot argue that it is not a beautifully made and almost perfect cinematic film.
Agreed.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
that movie is gorgeous and amazingly well done.
Like Rian Johnson, where he's not tethered to trying to tie it into someone else's story. Because I don't think he did a bad job linking it to Force Awakens. Not in the slightest. But I think if Rian
Rise
Johnson...
of Skywalker did a worse job linking to Last Jedi than anything else.
Agreed. 100%. I think if Rian Johnson had more story authority over everything around The Last Jedi, things would have been better.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
I know a lot of people are like, oh, it should have been like JJ all the way through. And I'm actually from the opposite standpoint where I'm like, no, it would have been better if it was Rian Johnson all the way through.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That does it for Star Wars for me for now. Yeah, until 2 weeks from now when we have more Star Wars. Don't know what we'd be talking about in 2 weeks, but I'm sure we will. Let's move on to my little bit because you got Mass Effect. I get The Expanse. Have you watched any of it?
Yeah, so I have not. So I've read a lot about it and I want to start watching it. I just haven't had the time. So give me the pitch, and then give me your thoughts.
All right. I really have loved the book series. The last book comes out. Rumor is October. September, October. So basically fall of this year, the last book in the series will come out. It is a very good science fiction book series. It has a lot of people try to equate it to Game of Thrones. And a lot of that is because like George R.R. Martin, like his former assistant is one of the writers. And so it has some of like the political aspect, but it doesn't get caught up in like the George R.R. Martin, I have 15 million points of view. There's really like only, I want to say maybe like 5 points of view throughout the entire series. But from the TV show, it's a solid TV show. And the first season's good. Like it's all good. Like I have some quibbles with like season 4, but and the reason I wanted to throw it on here, I have for the longest time said Battlestar Galactica is the best science fiction we've ever had on television. And season 5 of The Expanse is the first time I've questioned whether or not that's true. Season 5 of Expanse is phenomenal. This is another instance where a science fiction show should be walking away with Emmy after Emmy, but it won't because it's science fiction. It is that good. And the thing, too, is it is based off the book in the series that I think is the best book in the series. It is also one of the few times I, both as a reader and then again as a viewer, have legitimately felt like a sense of actual like anger outside of just like viewership. Like the content made me angry, not because, not in a bad way, but like events happened and you are just so angry at the person who did it that you are like angry the moment you put the book down. You're angry the moment the episodes end because fuck that guy sideways. It is so goddamn good. Like I would say seasons 1 through 4 are good. It's among the best science fiction we've had on television, but I wouldn't have, and I've told some people to watch it, but I haven't sat there and gone like, oh man, it's the best scene. Season 5, seriously, one of the best seasons of television I've seen in a long time. I would say like, if you're doing like a rundown of like the best television over like the past like of lockdown, it's been Mandalorian, Queen's Gambit, and season 5 of Expanse. Everything else there have been things I've enjoyed, but I wouldn't have sat there and been like, yeah, that's great television. Like season 5 of Expanse is holy shit. And it just finished this last week. It's that good. Like I legit was like, I need to make this a topic, not because I know Chris is watching it, but because I need to sit here and just say, people need to you need to watch The Expanse. Like,
yeah, I've heard some amazing things.
It's a slow burn. It does not hit you in the face from get-go like some other shows. That's not saying that the first season's bad. It's just once it starts going, it just keeps going. And then you're on the ride and you're in it. And then season 4 might be like, I'd call that the lull. But then season 5 is just like hitting you with a goddamn frying pan. And it's just, this is the reason why everyone who was a fan of the books, because I hadn't read the books or seen the show when it got canceled by Sci-Fi. This is, I think, the reason why everyone who was a fan of the books was like, no, the show needs to continue, is because they knew what was going to come when they got to this book and this season. And it is, Yeah, it is. It's up there. It's on my list now of best science fiction television. Like,
That's awesome.
so that would be my thing. Like, I don't offer that praise lightly or often. So, yeah. Holy crap, watch The Expanse. And that's it. That's their TV topic, is me going watch The Expanse. Everyone just needs to watch The Expanse. No spoilers. Just fucking watch that show.
Will do.
Speaking of TV, WandaVision.
Holy shit, this show's good.
I love the I still hold to what I said, and this is something I would have said when we were going to record 2 weeks ago. I still think that I appreciate the fact that they were willing to go all in on the concept for the first 2 episodes, but man, that I felt like episode 3 should have been episode 2. Like, they could have, honestly, I think they would have been better off if they had done a 40-minute episode instead of 2 30-minute episodes, where they could cut out some of the stuff in between and just treat it like it was like next up on show, like the next episode. Like, I think that would have made it work better and made it just a bit tighter, because, and this is,
I love the slow burn,
but this is also fully a problem where I would see other people who have said it for like almost like the opposite reason, but like in the same vein. I'm not the biggest fan of things like I Love Lucy or Bewitched. Like, for me, television is kind of like, there is pre-mash and post-mash, and that's a pretty good demarcation line on whether or not I like the show. And so those shows where I'm like, I got what they were doing, but it felt like they were beating the joke into the ground to me. Because again, I'm not the biggest fan of the shows.
I never saw it as like a joke. I saw it as like really paying homage, and like I loved the committal, and like, again, I love shows like I Love Lucy and Bewitched, and so like for me it was just such a great thing to see them go out. And like, let me say this first. Shout out to Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. It's hard to act that way.
Yeah,
it really
and that's the thing, is like, that's why I would say, as much as I as a viewer didn't like it, I applaud the fact that they were willing to do it. That does take guts from like a creative perspective to be like, no, we're fucking all in on I Love Lucy and Marvel. But also, that is a very different form of acting than we're used to as a modern audience. And they freaking,
and even the way it's shot,
it.
Right? Even the way it's shot is like perfect.
Well, that's the thing you and I even talked about. I said, if there's any one thing we should praise this series for, it's its cinematography, because they nail like television cinematography from that time period. And the only time they get into like the Brady Bunch stuff too. Yeah, and the only time it breaks is when the world that she's tried to create, or whoever has tried to create for her, starts to break down, is the only time the cinematography breaks form.
Right.
Which is is a very masterful touch. Because that's a cue to the viewer, even if they're not aware, like, even if you're not a savvy viewer and you might not be aware of it, the way we shoot things today,
subconsciously,
the way we shoot stuff today is very different than the way we shot stuff in the past. And while you might not have been able to put your finger on it, the fact that they would do that switch helps you realize that something's wrong. Beyond just even having like the colored, the fact that the drone was in color or the blood was red, like, those are very obviously something is wrong. But even before those moments, the cinematography has already clued you in that something is wrong.
Because your eyes adjust pretty quickly to like, oh, this is old TV.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it shifts, then it's really jarring. Like, you don't know what it is, or like if you're not paying attention, maybe you don't know what it is. But like, your eyes have just adjusted to 20 minutes of like old TV, and then when it shifts back to like modern sensibility, then
the
you're
illusion
like,
is broken, because the illusion has broken in the show, which is, I think, like, kudos, lots of kudos, and that again. Like I said, it's entirely a me thing, because I've heard other people from the opposite perspective where they love I Love Lucy and they love like shows like that, where, unlike you, who you appreciated it as an homage, they were just like, oh man, I just wanted to watch those shows instead.
But I do love like them slowly starting to introduce all of these elements. Like I love at the end of episode 1, like, oh, who's watching the TV? And then when you see it episode 3, when they go back through the whole thing, you're like, oh, Darcy's watching the TV. She's the one taking the notes the whole time. Holy shit! Right? And you're
Yeah,
like,
it's a nice touch, but I think it also this speaks, I think, to Feige and Marvel knowing the position they're in. If
where they can
this
just have
was
fun.
that they can just have fun, but not just that. Imagine if the disjointed DCEU tried this. People would tap out after the first episode.
Yeah.
If this was the first thing Marvel ever did, people wouldn't really watch after episode 2. This is able to this story is able to exist in this format because Marvel has spent over a decade building up to where they can kind of just do it.
Yeah. Like even stuff like starting episode 3 with the blip, right? And like having people come back. That's such a weird thing of like you need you need a lot of context to understand that scene.
Yeah.
You need a lot of context because the thing is like they don't introduce Monica as an older person, or you don't like if you don't know Captain Marvel, if you don't know Endgame, if you don't know anything prior, like there's so much there's so much pre-reading that you need to do to understand that scene.
Well, the
and
thing
how
that's
impactful
interesting
that scene
is I think you don't even if you haven't pre-read it, as you put it, you can still enjoy the show.
Yeah,
but
it pays off
like the blip
so
is
much.
something that it would not make sense if you hadn't seen Endgame. If this was someone's first foray into Marvel, they would be so confused by everything.
Well, that was the funny thing. I saw someone tweet out like, "Hey, I've never watched a Marvel movie, but WandaVision is really interesting. Can someone give me like a TLDR?" And someone said, "Well, shit, how much time do you have?"
Right, I know. Like, I would love to ask that person questions. Like, how much did you know? Like, because I know I have
They're doing a
talked.
great job. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen it. There's Disney Plus. There's this thing called Marvel Legends that they're doing, which are like these small bite size. They're like 5 to 8 minutes of just like the first 2 episodes are Scarlet Witch and Vision, and so it's just 5 to 8 minute primer of like who the characters are, what their history is, what their relationships are, where they're at in the story. Okay, go.
I know they did that for the comics, like 3-minute blips before in the past. It sounds like they're doing the same thing, but that is, I think, a very smart move.
Right. So the first 2 episodes are Wanda or Scarlet Witch and Vision are the 2 first episodes, and then in March, Falcon and Winter Soldier episodes drop like right before this, like the week before the series drops. So they're like just small primers of like, okay, cool. If you're not that into it, or if you don't remember, or hey, if you missed a couple of movies, like hey, here's where we're at. We're like, hey, if you're brand new to these characters, here's like the full story, and then cool, okay, go jump into the TV show.
I did love the bit that they had with the fact that she doesn't like. We all know her as Scarlet Witch, but
Oh,
the
she doesn't
fact
have a
that she
weird
doesn't
name.
have a weird name. It's like, oh yeah, they haven't done that in Marvel.
Yeah, she doesn't have
She's
a weird
just
name. Oh yeah. But
no.
I love the stuff I love the stuff they're throwing in there. I love the photon nodes nods, and like the fact that we know Monica has her powers at this point, but we don't know if she knows or okay. I think it's pretty clear that she knows that something's going on with her.
Yeah,
Because she has that like they scan her. Obviously, the MRI doesn't work, and it's pretty clear that it's her powers that are doing something, but she plays it off like it's Wanda's. And then when they want to do another CAT scan and they want to draw blood, then she's like, "Nah, I'm out of here."
yeah,
And obviously, it's easy to play that off as like a yeah, she's anxious to get back out there, but like there's look on her face, and like if you know the comics and you know that she gets powers eventually, like there's very clearly a thing that she knows something's wrong. Um, so yeah, I think that's really cool. Okay, uh, Wanda walking out of the force field and confronting Sword is one of the best scenes I've ever seen in the
I
MCU.
just love how she just is like messes with everyone's head and gets the guns pointed at the other guy. It's just like she's
Yeah,
pissed.
it's so good. Like
Um,
that came when she walked out, it freaked me out because I was like, "There's no way they're gonna bring her out of here this early." because there's still half the show left. Like, there's no
Right.
way that they're gonna.
This is not like her leaving and escaping. Like this is she's pissed at them for
Yeah,
interrupting
but like
the
I
dream.
thought they would have hid the guise of like, oh yeah, she's fully in control at this point. I thought they would have hid that more behind, like, because they're going. Spoilers ahead. If you've read the comics and you understand what's going on, there's a lot of Mephisto vibes and a lot of like uh other forces vibes. Like having Agnes in the show and having her be the person that kind of understands the most kind of what's going on, is sort of telling that, like, okay, maybe Wanda's not fully in control, but her coming out of the anomaly kind of shows like, oh yeah, okay, she's fully in control here. She understands what's going on.
Yeah.
And like to me, A, I thought they wouldn't have did it that early, but B, it also kind of shows me like, hey, maybe she isn't in control. Like having her come out and showing she's in control, maybe kind of is a red herring of like, okay, yeah, this tells me there's something else here. Because they
She's in
wouldn't
control,
drop
but
something
there's
like
something
that.
else. Yeah. She's not she's in control of what might be happening inside, but that doesn't mean she set up what's happening.
Right. Or there's a greater picture here of something like
Mm-hmm.
she is doing something else or someone else is pulling strings here. Because I don't think they would pull out that card of like, yeah, she's fully in control here this early. Because it is pretty early. It's halfway through.
Yeah.
And I feel
Also,
like
no, go ahead.
I feel like the mystery of like who's doing this is a bigger mystery than just like, yeah, Wanda's controlling it. That's too easy of an answer, right?
It's too easy of an answer, and it's too early in the series for it to be the answer.
Right. That's my main point.
But also, we can always use more Randall Park.
Absolutely. Well, they're pitching that Jimmy Woo show. Um,
Yeah,
so
I
so
saw
he
that.
he is so he does have his own comic, which is basically X Files for Jimmy Woo, and so it's just Jimmy Woo doing X Files stuff. And so that is a comic run that's happening or that had happened in the past. And so yeah, if they just do that in a Marvel TV show, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's
Stick him and
fantastic.
Darcy together. They can Fox Mulder and Scully their way
Yeah,
through
that'd be
through
great.
Marvel.
Um, yeah, that'd be really fun.
My God, I just realized how much I would watch that show.
Yeah, that show would be
uh,
fantastic. Um,
but also, I guess to hit the big spoiler because we haven't touched on it yet. Spoiler. I think there's a spoiler tag up. If there isn't, I'm sorry. There should be a spoiler tag up.
well, we just ruined a
How?
lot of the show for you if you haven't.
Yeah. We've already ruined a lot, but here's the big humdinger. Uh, how about that Quicksilver reveal?
Yeah, so cool, like, I think the cool thing. This goes back to the thing about pre-reading, where like if you don't know anything, you're like, oh, cool. It's like a new Quicksilver. Cool, she made a new Quicksilver. Where if you do know, you're like, that's Evan Peters from the
Yeah,
X-Men movies.
yeah. Like there's so many like like you could play it off as she recast Pietro, and it's like oh shit, it's not that she recast it. This is a different
She
Quicksilver.
pulled him from a different universe,
Yeah. Like first
which,
off,
which again, Scarlet Witch isn't that powerful to pull people from other universes. So something else is happening here, unless they're just kind of playing it off like tongue in cheek, which I don't think Feige is doing.
well, no, we know you and I had a huge text chain about this. We
Yeah,
know that based off statements Marvel has made, this ties into the next Doctor Strange movie, which is titled Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We know that
right,
this is going to tie into that there's been some theory for a while that this is the thing that opens up or creates the problem that Doctor Strange has to deal with, which is
right,
the multiverse, which would explain why a different Quicksilver from what had been previously a completely separate canon could enter in to the MCU canon.
right.
This is probably the Quicksilver of the X-Men universe. This isn't just
Yeah,
some
that she
like
pulled
one-off.
in from another dimension.
This is probably that other alternate version of it. But this also kind of goes into the thing I said before in the past when it comes to Deadpool, how much I want Deadpool 3 to just be him trying to escape the X-Men Fox continuity to get into the MCU, because that's where all the cool stuff's going on. Like, have that be, like, that's kind of my thing while watching this. I'm like, man, this is just like, please let that be the Deadpool movie.
Well, so this gets into like interesting stuff that Marvel's doing. Like, did you hear the thing that William Dafoe was spotted on the set for Spider-Man 3?
I did not hear that he was been spotted on Spider-Man 3, but we did know that
Alfred Molina is signed on. Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx
he's
are signed
Doc
on.
from 2, Spider-Man 2. The rumor is that
Foxx,
Tobey Maguire, Jamie Foxx, who did Electro, is also said to be involved as Electro again. Like, Tobey Maguire, as well. Andrew Garfield. Like, the Spider-Man movie is basically doing Spider-Verse.
Yeah. So
and
that's
it
really
also
cool,
is supposed to be tied into Multiverse of Madness.
Right. And did you hear all of the Multiverse of Madness rumors? These are like pretty recent too. So the old rumors were that we're getting that all these Spider-Men, so Maguire, like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, will be appearing in Doctor Strange in some way. So you'd assume in a cameo or whatever, like just kind of, I could see a portal sequence where like all these characters kind of pop their head in, right? Like very easily. There's also there's a rumor that Hugh Jackman is going to appear in there, and Halle Berry as Wolverine and Storm, right? So those are other rumors. And sort of the big one that's come out recently is that Chris Evans is back in the MCU, but not as Captain America. He'll be joining Jessica Alba as Johnny Storm and Sue Storm.
That is weird.
Yeah.
And hilarious.
Yeah.
And weird.
Yeah. Super cool, though. And so, there's a lot of talk about, like, I think Fassbender was rumored to be asked to join on. Like, basically, apparently from what I heard and what a lot of the rumors are saying is that Feige is just calling every actor that's ever done a Marvel movie and saying, like, hey, do you want to come in? Like, I've heard it. Apparently the rumor was that he called Nick Cage and was like, hey, do you want to come, like, cameo as Ghost Rider?
Oh, man.
And so Feige's doing his best to, like, now that he owns everything, right? Like, Marvel gave Feige all his toys back, right? Which is insane. Yeah. And, like, part of me thinks it was like a blessing in disguise that Feige didn't have all the pieces to start the MCU. But now that he has them all, I'm incredibly excited to see where he goes with this. But I could easily see a thing where now Feige just is able to pull together all of these continuities into one cohesive unit, and like it just explain like, yeah, all this stuff happened, it just in different dimensions, and this is the main timeline, and all the other offshoots still exist and still happen, but like are just different from ours. And I could very easily see Multiverse of Madness, or see WandaVision. And someone brought this up, and I really thought about it. Do you think WandaVision is a backdoor House of M? Like, is that how this series ends?
Possibly. You have to refresh me, because I know House of M is like a big multiverse bit.
So
but
House
you have to
of
refresh
M is
me on some of the details.
Basically, House of M is Wanda destroys all the mutants, like mutants no more, and destroys all the mutants. Right, uses her powers to change reality and make it so mutants never existed.
Yeah.
Could this be
a reverse?
The reverse House of M that brings mutants into the
before
MCU.
You had even said House of M. Like, I had been thinking this is probably how they're going to bring in mutants, where she's going to upset enough of the balance within this
Yeah.
multiverse that they're going to start having people experience
Yeah.
mutation.
Hmm.
Like,
But
I
it's
think that's
very
how.
likely that you, and so House of M, the story of House of M is very much tied into her children and the loss of her children, and like the loss of her family and her grief, and in her grief and in her madness, she destroys all the mutants. So could this be a backdoor way of getting House of M in here in the reverse
I
and
think so.
creating mutants for the MCU?
She's going to upset the balance of the universe, which is why Doctor Strange is going to be involved. And that also could set up another thing where if they ever do X-Men, that could even tie it into have like a Doctor Strange appearance and appearance of, Scarlet Witch, in the sense that it could be you have, because then you could change some of the backstory where like someone like Charles Xavier, he doesn't necessarily have to been, oh, I was a mutant from a child. It could be just like a man in his middle ages who's wealthy and realizes he's one of them and decides that
Right.
he's going to use his what power he has in money
I'm
to
curious
help
how you
protect. And I
do.
think that's how you could do it.
I'm curious how you do Magneto. I'm very curious how you do
You'd have
Magneto
to completely redo it with Magneto.
because the thing is, like him being a Jew during World War II is such a big part of his character.
Yeah.
It is like the Holocaust for Magneto is such a huge point of like how Magneto is who he is and why he is who he is and why he thinks the way he does
Mm-hmm.
because he's experienced so much prejudice and he understands like this is like his whole ideology is built around his character being a Jew during World War II.
Yeah, you'd
Like
almost,
it doesn't work, right? Like
it
it doesn't
doesn't
work if you
work
change.
unless you do some form of time travel. It doesn't work. Or you have to, as sad to say it, like you have to mine some other atrocity,
Yeah, but I don't
which
know what atrocity even compares to like give him that mindset anymore. Like as we get further and further and further away from World War II, it gets harder and harder to make that character work.
because even as gruesome as it is to say, the genocidal intent of Nazi Germany, even later genocides weren't as organized.
Or as bloodthirsty,
Yeah,
which is weird to say for a genocide because that's what the whole point. But like I don't think genocide. I don't think they hunted like like Nazi Germany did.
like you have other genocides, like you have Rwanda, but
Yeah,
I don't know if this. I think also portrays the fact that as Americans, we don't really do a great job, reading the world news. I don't know if Rwanda would compare. I also don't know if they'd be comfortable doing that.
yeah. And
Um,
again, I don't want to say like, oh, it's impossible to do that kind of character, but it does change the way Magneto has to be done
yeah, you
because
have to redo Magneto.
otherwise it's really hard to justify his overall mindset because it comes down to the thing of like MLK versus Malcolm X, right? Like it's basically their mindsets, right? Like that's basically the dynamic that they have between Charles and
The idea
Magneto.
of peaceful protest versus violent protest.
Right. And so, but like it's hard to justify how far Magneto takes everything and how like it's hard to justify his mindset when you don't have the context of like what he's been through and why he feels this way, right? Um and so yeah, again, like I don't know how you do that now. Yeah, like I just keep thinking about it, like I don't know because what makes Magneto such a great villain is that you do understand where he's coming from, and he does make good points. And as much as Charles is the quote unquote good guy, there's no doubt that like Magneto has a point, and like there is certain times where he's right.
But yeah,
But it's
that his point is based off, like, it is based off his viewpoint, but there is a very, very large component of truth to his viewpoint, because he literally
right.
did experience people trying to kill off everyone he knew, essentially. Like, his entire, like, they tried to exterminate the Jewish people. Why won't they try to do the same with the mutants? And it's just like,
but again, it's hard to see that work today, especially if you're just making it set in modern day and like having him be a middle-aged person. Like he doesn't have that context, right?
yeah,
and so having him, it just comes across as like an angsty kid, right?
yeah, and it also is the question of, if you do a moment of this, like, I hate to say it, but if you try to do it as someone young, from a modern perspective, you'd almost want it to be someone who got from family separation on the American southern border. And Marvel is kind of politically hands off.
Right.
Not so maybe so much in the comics, but definitely in the movies.
It just changes the way that character has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think without that, I don't think he's as sympathetic and as a deeply layered a character, right? Which again, Marvel hasn't done a great job of doing that with its villains, but I would argue they haven't really done a villain as iconic as Magneto yet.
Yeah.
Like the closest thing is Ultron, but Ultron, it's just iconic characters, right? Like the iconic characters, Thanos is close. Like they did Thanos justice really, really well. Like
because Thanos was also a big bad in multiple movies. He wasn't just the villain of them. Like the biggest problem with villains in Marvel movies has been typically they're one and done. The exception maybe being, the Civil War.
Oh, Zemo?
Zemo.
Well, he's about to be in Falcon Winter Soldier, so we're going to see him and a little more of his mindset. But
because Zemo wasn't, I'm going to take over the world or destroy. He literally just wanted to get vengeance on Tony and Cap.
Yeah. Well, they changed the hell out of that character.
Yeah.
Remember, the original Baron Zemo wanted to be the head of Hydra and wanted to be the true leader of Hydra and overthrow the Red Skull. That was the original.
Yeah, that was
Baron
the original.
Zemo. But... So this character that they've made, Helmet Zemo, is very, very different. So you know, I could see them doing it with Magneto, but again, it's hard. Like Zemo is an iconic villain of Marvel, but he's not Magneto. Magneto's the top tier Marvel villain.
Yeah.
And so, and not just that, but he has more of a backstory than your typical villain. He's more of an anti-hero or like a heroic villain than anything else, right? Like he is a main character.
You know, he is the bad guy, quote unquote bad guy.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in not Days of Future Past, but in First Class, is the barroom scene with Magneto.
Oh, where he's in Brazil?
Yeah.
Or Barcelona or whatever?
Or Argentina.
He throws the knife around?
Yeah.
He's throwing the knife around? Oh my God.
You're not sitting here going, yeah, murder, great. But at the same time, you kind of don't begrudge him that.
You get it.
You get it. You totally get it. And that kind of like sets up his mindset where he like views it as it's me versus them. And it's a fight for survival. Whoever wins survives. The others need to die.
And the thing that's interesting about Magneto is it's not so much that Magneto's the bad guy, because he does have a mutual respect for Charles and a love for his people. Yeah. But it's a thing of, you're in my way and you're a detriment to our movement, our cause. So we need to get you out of our way. It is not a malicious, like, I'm going to do bad things because I'm a bad person. This is for the bet. Obviously every villain thinks they're the hero, right?
Yes.
but the but it's the idea that like he does have a love for the good guys, right? Like he's doing this for them, and it's the same. You have to almost approach Magneto as like as a Thanos character, where you have to sympathize with him and you have to understand.
You
That's why
see
I
his
think
viewpoint even though you disagree with it.
right, and I think that's why it's so important for like when Marvel did Infinity War. I think it's so important for them to split that into two movies because Infinity War is Thanos' movie, and for all intents and purposes, you spend the majority of the time with Thanos in that movie, and you understand who Thanos is by the end of that movie. You understand who he is and what his mindset is and why he does what he does and who he and like
He
you don't necessarily
he thinks he's on a holy crusade.
right, but you don't like you learn to kind of like Thanos at the end of that movie,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I don't like this guy. He's doing
It's
bad
like the
things,
whole
but
thing
like I
with
get
like
it.
the crying about like losing Gamora for him. Like it humanized
Yeah,
him so much because you realize he hates the fact that he has to toss one of the things he loves, but he does it not because, haha, I'm evil, but because he's like, I have to sacrifice something I love to save the universe.
for the greater good, right? Right, and like so like there's certain villains, Marvel villains that I think deserve the attention and deserve the pedestal. Like I would have said Ultron, but I think going back on it and looking at it, they did do Ultron pretty well. It was just a thing of actually now looking back on it, Age of Ultron is actually an extremely important movie.
It
Um,
is. It's one of those. I think the problems Age of Ultron had is, and this kind of ties into something I've said about Last Jedi. I think a lot of people get the idea of what the movie's supposed to be in their head that they aren't willing to actually sit down and think about the movie they saw.
right.
And Ultron isn't the first Avengers in that, yeah, there's kind of an end of the world extinction moment at the end, but Avengers was big and epic in a way that Age of Ultron wasn't.
No.
Age of
Age of
Ultron
Ultron is
was
more
more
emotional.
personal, more
Yeah.
emotional. And the biggest problems it had, from my understanding, is that there had been a push and pull between Marvel, and I think that probably means Perlmutter and Whedon, over
Yeah.
the emotionality of the piece.
Right.
Because you also look at that time period, that's when quite a few directors seem to be having issues. And given what some
Yeah, that
actors
was
have said, I have a feeling that it's all Perlmutter and not Feige. But yeah, it's one of those things where within the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's a very important piece, but it is a piece that helped build and push the story rather than being the big epic culmination of the story.
yeah. So yeah, like the villains that I think deserve that kind of level of treatment is like Ultron, Thanos, Doctor Doom, Magneto, and possibly if they treat him as a villain, Silver Surfer are the kind of five major kind of Marvel pieces villain wise that I think like deserve the Thanos treatment of like you need to understand these characters in order to make them work and to make them as important as they are and as big of players as they should be. And like I don't know how you do that with getting back to the entire point of the argument. I don't know how you do that with Magneto without completely changing his character.
Yeah, like this is just my kind of thought about it to go back to. Again, I don't think Marvel would do this because I think the political ramification, like I think Marvel, like this Disney and Marvel in terms of the film releases, I think are too politically phobic to do something like this.
Right.
But I bet you could do, if Magneto was younger or maybe even middle aged and gets like do like the family separation side of it, I think you could do Magneto in a modern setting. But then you would have a huge political aspect of where you're basically making a political statement about American politics of today, which I don't think they would want to do. But I could see that being a viewpoint of where
Plus, it's
he
very
makes that
different
break.
too. Like, they're not
Hmm.
murdering children; they're
They're
just
not
separating
like, yeah,
families and doing
they're just
like,
separating families, but like I don't know other, I can't think of a contemporary moment that
plays like that, right?
plays like that where you could get a lot of the same vibes.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
people
it's
have
really
phrased
tricky.
those as, yeah, it's really tricky, but I could see that being the play. But I could also see that
Like,
being the theme that
you
they're,
could do a thing, you could do a thing where like he is Jewish and his family was heavily affected by the Holocaust, but I think it's very different than him being himself a victim of the Holocaust, right?
yeah, it's, yeah. And I think that's the tricky thing is like, you need to have there be an event in his life that is universally like horrifying, but could give him that viewpoint of it's us versus them, where they don't think
Yeah,
of us as human.
yeah,
Like, because they didn't think of me as human before I even was a mutant.
yeah. God, okay, this is another one. What what if they made him black?
That would be very, God, it's one of those scenes where it's like, wow, that feels like it would be forward thinking, but at the same time, it's like, but
What if
you
they
could,
made him black and just changed it to racial injustice?
um, you know, the criticism that Killmonger got? Imagine that
Yeah,
amplified.
that's what I'm saying. Like, again,
Like,
it fits. I think it fits. It just like they would take so much shit.
yeah, no, there are options, but it's like what happened in like the past 20 years that would validate someone being like homicidal. Um, yeah, there is a very dark train of thought that we've already dived into a little more than we probably normally would. But yeah, no, I agree. Like Magneto is probably the big question mark that it wouldn't shock me at all if that's a lot of their discussions right now is how do we handle that?
Yeah.
Unless they want to do time travel, don't do time travel. Not that you can't do time travel in the Marvel universe. You've already done it. But don't do that as just a means to sidestep this character problem.
Yeah.
Just figure out a way to tell it.
Do you think we get old Magneto and Professor X, or do we get like the McAvoy Fassbender? Like,
I think we'd get McAvoy, Bossbender era age Magneto.
you know, you don't think we get
Xavier.
The Patrick Stewart, uh, Ian McKellen
Want to hear my
age?
really, 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 really like looking at a future franchise answer behind that? If you cast them younger, you might be able to run an X-Men series for a couple decades with the same actors in the same roles.
Yeah,
Not saying that'd be the
but
reason why, but
I mean, I think the goal in mind would be to eventually to kind of shift the focus to like the young kid, right? Like, because obviously you would cast a young Beast, a young Iceman, a young
yeah,
Cyclops, a young
I
Wolverine,
think it's
right?
going to be kind of like, I think that they're going to do an X-Men first class of it only because not because of the longevity reason I gave. I think it is honestly, given the explanation we have, you could get away with an older version of Xavier. I don't think you could do it with Magneto. Because if this is the thing, if we House of M this with WandaVision,
Right.
how would Magneto in old form have been like this, like, it raises a lot of questions about Magneto and his powers and who he was if we go with an older Magneto.
Right.
So I think it just makes sense to just kind of sidestep it, and maybe not as young as they're portrayed in First Class. I could see them doing like a 50-year-old or mid-40s Charles Xavier. And
with like
I would
20-year-old
actually,
kids.
yeah, and I would say like Magneto is probably younger.
And then what, you just have all your students be like 18,
Yeah.
19. Yeah.
And you can also, again, like, because of the whole Doctor Strange angle, it is we need to find some way to help these people figure out how to control their powers. And here's this guy with a fortune who can give them a safe home. You could, like, I think that's how they're going to do it. I think it's going to be Doctor Strange working with Xavier to set up his school, because he realized, like, Doctor Strange, like he says in one of the movies, he keeps track of all these problems. There's one way to help you keep track of it.
Yeah.
Help find the people and make sure that they learn how to control what they can do.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to think about. Like, Doctor Strange is such a huge connective piece of Marvel Comics as a whole. Like, he's such an important player in every single major storyline, where it's starting to become that way in the MCU.
Because he makes sense for a lot of the more cosmic, magical types of things, and anything that would be like a major underlying threat that wouldn't be obvious to like technology.
Right. So, like, again, it's just so interesting to see how that's going to play out. And, like, I don't know if Cumberbatch fully understood the implications of, like, taking on the role, right? Where, like, yeah, dude, you're like the piece. And it's so interesting to me to think about Cumberbatch in that role now, because he's so great at it, right? And he's the perfect piece to fit in there as that kind of connective tissue. Remember, their first choice was Joaquin Phoenix, which I don't know how well he would have worked as this connective tissue piece.
Yeah, like Joaquin Phoenix is, I love him as an actor, but I do not see him in that role. Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, was an inspired casting choice.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know.
Sherlock is a very different character to Doctor Strange, but Benedict Cumberbatch has a way to bring an arrogant asshole into a character in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. But again, even in Sherlock, he is sort of his presence is that of, like, commanding and leadership, and very much like a
he's
calming.
At the center of everything.
Right. And again, it works. I just don't know how all this would have played out if we had Joaquin Phoenix, because it doesn't, like, think about the Thor Ragnarok scene, right? That doesn't work with Joaquin Phoenix. I don't think
Joaquin Phoenix is the kind of person who would want to, like, he doesn't strike me as the guy who wants to be in the Temple franchise. He also doesn't need to be in a franchise. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch doesn't either, but I mean, I don't think Joaquin, like, even though he did Joker, I don't think he sits there and thinks of it as, like, that was a one and done. I don't think he would have wanted to play the Joker again.
In, like, a franchise, no.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, like, it wouldn't surprise me at this point, because we've seen, getting back to WandaVision, the cast and crew, and Elizabeth Olsen, and a lot of people that have worked on WandaVision are saying that there's a huge Luke level cameo in WandaVision, and I don't think the Evan Peters, and they've said the Evan Peters thing isn't it.
I don't believe them.
I don't know. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it is Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I think it's Doctor Strange. Though, do you want to share the one theory you shared with me on Friday of who you think it is?
Oh, well,
or not necessarily the big cameo, like Luke level
it's
cameo.
It's like the pipe dream, right?
Yeah.
It's like the pipe dream of, like, Monica calls a aerospace engineer that she knows, right? And it's like, I know a guy that can do this. And they throw it in there pretty casually, but, like, very obviously, like, they're like hinting at something.
It's like, don't look over here.
It's like a throwaway. Yeah, it's like a throwaway line that like, hey, you'll remember this later. Um, and like, okay, cool. Wouldn't it be really cool if that's the first time we get to see if it is John Krasinski in a Reed Richards role, maybe pre-Powers?
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of talk that he and Emily Blunt had been talking to Feige for a long time.
They've been pitching
about
themselves as Fantastic Four.
Yeah, and so once Fox had once Disney had acquired Fox and got the rights back, there were a lot of rumors that Feige and Krasinski and Blunt had been meeting to discuss things. And so, honestly, they're my picks for Reed Richards and Sue
They're a
Storm.
good
Like
pick.
they're perfect for it.
They're a good pick. And also Krasinski
And
fits the mold of the from the directing side, the mold of the director who might not necessarily be your first thought of an action Marvel film, but probably could pull one off if he's given like the right team behind him. So I could see it being not just
Right.
him playing the role, but him directing the film. Though, didn't they announce
And
a
he's
director already
he's
for Fantastic Four?
yeah, it's John Watts. It's the
Yeah.
Spider-Man guy. But
Yeah.
again, if that's the direction they're going, and that is, and think about Spider-Man and what John Watts does, it's comedy and it's family style comedy.
Yeah.
Uh, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski have both proven that they can do that really, really well. And again, they already have the wife-husband chemistry. They look the part. They're perfect for it. And I think they're both great actors and can pull this off. Like I think it's perfect.
Two really solid actors who I think like, especially since they're the fact that they are a couple outside and they're pitching for the role. I don't see why not. Like Marvel can kind of do whatever they want anymore. So
yeah. And yeah, I just don't think like John Krasinski would play perfectly the hyper intelligent but super aloof and like kind of not stupid but kind of like ditzy super genius that Reed Richards is, right?
yeah,
Like the super optimistic, super intelligent but like kind of goofy and oblivious to the rest of the world guy is perfect for Krasinski. And then the strong, independent woman that Sue Storm is, like, yeah, that's Emily Blunt in a nutshell. Like, it's perfect.
yeah. What is it?
They've both proven that they can play these roles.
What is the thing that spray painted in God, what's that movie with Tom Cruise? That's really good. That had a really bad name.
Oh, Enter Tomorrow, but they changed the name to
Live, Die, Repeat because that's what it should have been from the beginning.
Yeah.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Do you know what the sequel's called? They're filming the sequel. You know what it's called?
No.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Oh my God. But it's like, what is it on the spray painted on there? Iron Bitch or something like that?
Yeah.
It's like Emily Blunt could kick ass.
She's great in that movie, by the way.
She's like that movie is one of the few times I think Tom Cruise has been perfectly cast.
Oh no, man! Mission Impossible. He's perfect in Mission Impossible.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the character he plays is an asshole who kind of has to become like the hero, and so it felt like Tom Cruise got imbued into the character a bit more than normal. Like the Tom Cruisiness aspect, the fact that it was Tom Cruise playing the role, I think helped because you kind of wanted to punch his character when you first see him.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've digressed fully. But yeah, no, I think this points to a lot of interesting possibilities for Marvel's future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited.
But with that, I think that does it for this really long episode. Besides, I just got the alert in my AirPods to be like, we're about to die from the battery. So with that in mind, please like, share, subscribe. Do all the fun things you are supposed to do whenever you, like something. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email at feedback@quality3.net. Like us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. All those things. Eventually, I'll do stuff on social, right? Eventually. Who knows? But otherwise, stay safe, wear a mask, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.